Hi, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to our last installment of our Healthy Living series in partnership with Confluence Health. My name is Alicia, and I'm the Adult Services Manager here at NCW Libraries. And our mission here at NCW Libraries is to connect the people of North Central Washington to vital resources and opportunities that foster individual growth and strengthen communities. And this evening, we have Katie Mathews, who's a physician's assistant at Confluence Health, is going to give us a wonderful overview of healthy living. And I know that's going to be really insightful. So I'm just going to lead it over to you, Katie. Thank you.
Yes, so I'm Katie Mathews. I'm a PA in Gastroenterology at Confluence Health. And I know that my title slide here says Healthy Living Series Introduction. I was supposed to give this talk at the very beginning, but I had this crazy case of laryngitis and literally couldn't talk. So we switched it to the end, and it's going to be Healthy Living Series Overview. And I think that it's an appropriate time to kind of review everything that you've talked about. I'm going to kind of touch on a lot of little big topics, but in little snippets throughout tonight. And my goal is that tonight you would really be able to take away some easy, actionable things that you can begin doing in your life that can be implemented and can really improve your health, because I think that the decisions that we make and the choices that we make have a really big impact in health. So I'd like to start off with a quote. So this is a quote by Dr. Sarah Gottfried, and she's a really interesting resource. She's a OBGYN trained at Harvard Medical School and MIT, but she now runs the precision medicine at Marcus Institute at Thomas Jefferson University. So she kind of combines traditional medicine with more functional medicine. And she says, you have the power to get your body to work for you instead of against you. You have the power to be able to allow your body to work for you. And so often I think that we outsource our healthcare. And I do think that it's really important to work with your practitioner in a lot of your health. But I really believe that the choices that you make and the things that you do in your daily life can really make a difference in how your body works. And getting it to work for your benefit instead of feeling like it's working against you. But I think that in order to tap into that power, we first have to determine our why. So we are now at the end of a Healthy Living series. And for some reason, you decided to take time out of your day to listen to these talks. And I'm always curious why. Why is this important to you? Why are you here? Why did you take this time? And I think it's really helpful for us to stop and just to take a minute and think about why we're here. Why do we care? Why is health important? And just to step back and to kind of identify that and determine what our why is. And so I would encourage you at the end of tonight to stop and to think, why did I take time to do this? What's important to me? What am I hoping to get from this series? And so in order to do that, you want to take the time, and it could be for lots of different reasons. You could want to feel better. You could have a disease or a diagnosis that you want to improve. You could want to be up to date on the guidelines. Real briefly, for myself, I am not an expert in health by any means. I have a real personal interest in it, and I've always kind of had a bent towards health. But I personally, a couple months into COVID, like I think a lot of us, just was not feeling good. The decisions that I was making and the way that I was living, I just woke up in the morning not feeling good, tired, fatigued, GI symptoms, and I just was tired of it. I didn't want to feel like that anymore. And so for me, that was my why, wanting to feel better. And so I would encourage you to take the time to do that. And then once you do that, I really think that it's helpful for us to try to align our actions with our beliefs. Really think about our body and our minds do not like to be disconnected. We don't like there to be a discord between what we believe and what our actions are. And so I want you to stop and to think, do your daily activities and choices align with what you believe to be true? Are the things that you're doing every day. So you have your why, you have your beliefs, and is how you're living aligning with that. And stop and think of how much of your daily energy do you invest in your health? You obviously care about your health because you're here tonight. People who don't care about their health wouldn't take their time to do this. And so do this as a no judgment. Do not judge yourself for how much of your daily energy is invested, but just take a minute, stop and think, what am I doing in my day? And is this investing in my health? And with that no judgment question, think, are you happy with your daily investment? Are you satisfied with that? Or do you want it to be more? Do you want it to be different? And then what is one choice you can make that could help you align your actions with your beliefs? And that's where I hope tonight I can provide a few ideas into ways that you could make just one small choice that would help you align those and resolve a little bit of that discord that you may have. So these are the ideas of pillars of health. Now there's 1,000 different ideas of pillars of health. If you Google it, some people say that there's one, some people have 12. These are kind of the ones that I want to touch on tonight: personalized nutrition, movement, stress management, sleep, and purpose and connection. And a lot of these have been reviewed in previous talks, and some of them I will, full disclosure, I do not know as much about. Stress management, purpose and connection, I don't know as much about those sorts of things. So I hope that previous talks have been helpful there, but I would like to touch on them each at least briefly and give you some ideas of things that could be important and helpful for your health. So the first one is personalized nutrition. And I put personalized in there very intentionally because I don't think that one person's correct nutrition is the same for everybody. So what is helpful for me is not always going to be helpful for you. And I think that we really find benefit and longevity in eating the way that best feeds our body. I do think that there are some general guidelines, and I'd kind of like to review those and then kind of think about some personal choices. So general guidelines: one, not all calories are created equal. Yes, calories are important, but it's kind of like if you were to take a pound of feathers and a pound of rocks and go up to a bridge and drop them off. A pound of rocks is obviously going to fall much faster and cause much more disruption on the ground when it lands. A pound of feathers is going to float down nicely and land easily on the ground and not cause so much disruption. It's the same with calories. A 100-calorie cookie is not going to provide your body with the same information as 100 calories of broccoli or whatever fruit you want to eat. And so I think it is important to get beyond calories and to think about what is the caloric, the nutritional quality of the calories that we are consuming. And so really getting beyond just calorie counting and really thinking about the type of calories that we're consuming. The next is blood sugar management. And we often don't think about this outside of diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is a very common diagnosis that we have in healthcare. And once you get to that point, you start thinking about blood sugar management. But I think blood sugar management prior to any diabetes or for a person without any sort of a diabetic diagnosis is really important. And so the way that this kind of works is I kind of think of it as like emojis. So you eat a cookie and you digest it and it goes into your stomach, into your small intestine, and it gets broken down into glucose. And glucose is the energy, or what our body uses for energy. So as this cookie gets broken down, these cookie emojis, these glucose, go into our bloodstream and are floating around. And in order to get the glucose out, you have to have insulin come along, grab the cookie emoji, and then go store it in a cell. And usually those are stored in the liver and the muscle. So if we have these really big blood sugar spikes, so we eat something like a cookie that takes our glucose from baseline and drives it way up with a big increase, then we get a huge surge of energy, but the body wants to equilibrate. So the body doesn't like to have that big surge of glucose. And so it wants to bring it crashing back down. And it doesn't bring it down nice and slow when it's that high. It brings it down really quickly. But the problem is that the body doesn't return it to baseline. It takes it below baseline because it's trying to equilibrate so aggressively. And it's that drop below our baseline where we start to get symptoms, fatigue, brain fog, cravings. So our body, it still wants to be in balance. So if we eat a cookie, it drives our blood sugar way up, we come crashing down, we get fatigued, but then we want to bring the glucose back up And what's the quickest way to bring it back up? It's another cookie or an easy source of glucose. And so we start to crave things that will try to bring our glucose back up really quickly. And so these big spikes, these big frequent spikes are what lead to increased fasting blood sugar, which is where we get our diabetes diagnosis. It also leads to increased fasting insulin, because if you remember, it's insulin which takes that cookie emoji out of the bloodstream. So if we have that, the insulin is working, then when you're fasting or you're not eating, your insulin stores are going to be higher. And it's those fasting insulin stores that are what's leading to diabetes, but other diseases like hypertension, PCOS, hypertriglyceridemia, visceral fat, or fat around our body. So I just think that we need to start thinking about blood sugar management way before any sort of a diabetes diagnosis. One little trick here, if you're interested in trying to kind of regulate your blood sugar, so you don't want these big spikes and quick crashes, you kind of want the nice gradual rise and then the nice return back to baseline, is pairing carbohydrates, which are the fastest way that our body are going to raise glucose, with a protein, a fat, and a vegetable. So if you go out to dinner and you get the bread roll, and so you eat the bread roll, and that's going to be a really quick source of glucose. It's going to drive everything up. And then you eat your meal. And then about the time that your blood sugar is crashing, what is it? It's dessert time. And of course, it sounds delicious because our blood sugar is crashing and we want to bring it back up. But if you just simply moved the timing of that roll, that dinner roll, to after your meal, so you eat your protein and your fat and your vegetable first, you aren't going to see, and then your bread roll, you aren't going to see such a massive spike and dive with your blood sugar. It's going to be much more gradual. So anytime you're eating a carbohydrate or a sugar, pairing it with a protein and a fat will really help kind of blunt that blood sugar spike. So that's kind of one little trick that you could add. Avoiding or limiting sugar, particularly liquid sugar, gluten, and refined oils. So sugar is everywhere. It's crazy. And sugar is ridiculously addictive. So there was actually a study in 2008 that took mice and they put sugar in water and cocaine in water. And the mice actually preferred the sugar water over the cocaine water. Now, I'm obviously not saying sugar and cocaine are the same thing, but what I'm just saying that these mice preferentially chose the sugar water for the effects that it gave them and the addictive properties that it had over the cocaine water. And it's a problem. It's our problem in our diet. And if you look, sugar is in everything. It's in your condiments. It's in your peanut butter. It's in everything. And so one suggestion I might have is look at your condiments or look at your salad dressings and read the ingredients and see if there's sugar. And then you don't have to go through and necessarily overhaul your entire refrigerator. But as you run out of something, if it contains sugar, try to replace it with a non-sugar substitute or item. Ketchup, you can get non-sugar ketchup. And so just being aware of the hidden sugars that you're consuming, I think, can really lower our daily intake. Liquid sugar, this is a real problem. This has been associated with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, fatty liver, which we're seeing rise really quickly, particularly in the United States. So this is juice, soda, those really fancy coffee drinks that taste delicious. It just really is a problem. It leads to increased, we have seen that liquid sugar specifically leads to increased central obesity. So that's that belly fat that we have. And we know that central obesity, the belly fat, has a greater negative impact on our health. And so that would be another place to really start thinking about your sugar intake, is if you're drinking a soda a day, try to switch it to a diet and then try to switch it to, a LaCroix or something, not just trying to take it out entirely and switch to plain old boring water, but removing it and swapping it for something else, I think can be helpful. Gluten. So gluten, the thing about gluten, there's celiac disease, which is actual gluten allergy, and that's relatively rare. But non-celiac gluten sensitivity is really, really common. So people don't tolerate gluten very well. Not everybody, but a lot of people don't tolerate gluten very well. And it's causing a lot of symptoms, GI symptoms, bloating, skin issues, allergies. It really can cause a big inflammatory response in our body. And so just removing gluten can make you feel better in ways that you didn't know you were necessarily feeling poorly. If you have an autoimmune disease, removing gluten because of the inflammatory response that people can have can be really helpful. And so that's one big food group that people don't tolerate very well, and removing that can often be helpful. And then there's the refined oils, again, in everything. So these are the industrialized seed oils. So like canola oil, vegetable oil, safflower oil, all the oils that aren't, so the non-industrial seed oils would be olive oil, avocado oil, and coconut oil. And the thing about these is that these oils significantly increase omega-6 and decrease omega-3. So the thing about omega-6 is that it influences the body's inflammatory pathway, and at the same time, it inhibits the anti-inflammatory pathway of the omega-3s. So we want a diet that's high in omega-3s, which you can get from supplements or from like fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines. But these seed oils, these industrial seed oils, are really high in the omega-6, which leads to more inflammation through their own pathway, but also through kind of suppressing the omega-3 pathway. And high levels of omega-6 and low levels of omega-3 are related to a lot of diseases, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, irritable bowel syndrome, cancer, psychiatric disorders. And so this would be another thing to look at your salad dressing and see what kind of oils in there. When you run out, if you want to pick one with an avocado or a olive oil, is a great swap. And then also consider some form of time restricted eating. So, or intermittent fasting. This has also kind of gained traction recently, but there is a lot of data behind time restricted eating. And what this means is that you're not eating for a period of the day. So what we do is we eat really late into the night until we go to bed, and then we're eating again first thing in the morning, and our body is not getting a break. And the benefits of having that break are pretty remarkable. One, it gives us the ability to use up that stored glucose that we have stored away, and that we use that for our energy rather than giving our body more glucose. The next is something called autophagy, and this is seen more with longer term fasting. But what this is, it's basically the body's way of doing a cellular clean out. So when you're not eating, it wants to hold on to good cells and get rid of bad cells, and basically clean up cells. And the cells that are bad cells are the ones that can lead to cancer, dementia, Alzheimer's. And so giving your body that break can allow for that autophagy or cellular clean out of our bodies. Another kind of interesting thing with this is something called the migrating motor complex. And what that is it's essentially sweeper cells or cleaner sweeper cells in our GI tract that will clean up the lining of the GI tract, but it's not activated until you have been fasting for 90 minutes. So if you're eating every hour, you are not going to be able to activate that migrating motor complex. And so just trying to do some form of time restricted or intermittent fasting. So that could just be as simple as a 12-hour fast with a 12-hour eating window. And that would just look like stopping eating at 8 o'clock at night and don't eat until 8 in the morning, and start there. And again, this is a personalized thing. Some people will do better with longer fasts, like a 16-hour fast. And some people, it's too stressful on their body. Menstruating women, it can be hard to do those longer fasts, and it causes more stress. And so just a shorter fast is helpful. So those are kind of some general guidelines, and then some personal choices. So really think about the foods that trigger you. And sometimes these can be hard to identify. I do think that keeping a food symptom journal can be helpful. So writing down what you eat and how it makes you feel. And sometimes it's hard to piece through. I mean, I don't remember what I had for dinner last night and how I felt afterwards, but maybe if what I had for dinner on Monday night made me feel bloated. And then what I had for dinner on Thursday night also made me feel bloated. And I see that I happen to eat the same thing or something similar. And so keeping a journal for a period of time, I think can be helpful to avoid the foods that are bothering you. And the foods that are bothering you aren't going to be the same as the ones that bother me. Leaning into the habits you enjoy. That's the thing, is you got to find something that you like. And this can be so many different ways of eating: keto, paleo, vegan, Mediterranean, some combination of the four, something totally different. But you have to like what you're doing, and you have to enjoy the food that you're eating. And so, thinking about what you like, I think is helpful. Think about filling half your plate with non-starchy vegetables. So sometimes you can think of the plate as a clock. And so if you want to try to fill from 12 to 6 with some sort of non-starchy vegetable, from 6 to 9 with proteins and fat, and it doesn't have to be animal proteins, it can be any sort of protein. And then from 9 to noon with a carbohydrate of some sort, if you'd like. I think that's a good way of trying to crowd out the things that you don't want on your plate with the things that you do want on your plate. There has been little argument that colorful vegetables are not good for your body. The nutrients and the information that those vegetables provide to your body are really helpful. So, and then thinking about optimizing your microbiome. So we have trillions of microbes in our GI tract, and this microbiome can work for you and can work against you. And this is a huge topic. But one kind of little snippet here is they just did a study out of Stanford that compared high fiber diet to a high fermented foods diet in terms of the microbiome. So high fiber would be fruits and vegetables, but also like psyllium husk, chia seeds, those sorts of things. But then they compared it to fermented foods. So that would include like sauerkraut, kefir, kimchi, yogurt. And they really saw that, surprisingly to them, the high fermented foods diet played more benefit in terms of optimizing your microbiome than the high fiber diet, which I think is kind of interesting and a little bit new in the data. And so something like adding, if you can tolerate it, sauerkraut to your daily diet is great. They have a really good one at Costco that comes in a big container, and getting that and taking a couple of spoonfuls of that a day, and just thinking every time you're taking that sauerkraut, you're feeding your microbiome, or if you prefer yogurt or something else. So those are just kind of some ideas in terms of food. So movement actually, when we think about this, we want to think about exercise plus our daily movement. So movement is not just the 30 minutes of exercise that you do in the morning or the evening or whenever you do your movement, but it's also what your daily movement is. And this can vary a lot. So I have a Fitbit that tracks my steps, and there is a significant difference in my daily movement from the days that I'm at home with my 5 and 7-year-old compared to the days that I'm in clinic. And so really thinking about that and what your days look like and what your daily movement is throughout those days is really helpful in terms of thinking about the movement piece of your life, and because it's bigger than just exercise, and it's really important. So studies show that people who sit for long periods of time and got no physical exercise, so they had little exercise and little daily movement, had a 40% higher risk of early death. 40% without that exercise piece and without that daily movement piece. So there's a lot of potential risks of a sedentary life. They have shown that sitting 8 to 9 hours in a day can increase your heart disease by 14%, your risk of cancer by 13%, your risk of diabetes by 91%, increases your risk of depression, anxiety, obesity. And I want to be careful because these stats aren't here to make you feel bad. I think that there's enough of that going around, the shaming piece, because it's hard. It's hard to get up and move. And the thing is we weren't necessarily inclined to do that for much of our existence. So in the hunter-gatherer stage of our development, we needed to preserve our energy. It took a lot of work to just meet daily needs. And so in meeting the daily needs, you got the movement that was required, but it's not so hard to meet our daily needs anymore. When groceries are delivered to you and everything is on the computer, our life just looks really different. And so I don't think you need to feel bad about the fact that it's hard to move. It's hard to exercise. It doesn't mean that you don't do it, but I don't think that you should feel bad about the fact that it can be challenging. So there are just so many benefits to moving. And this is kind of something like a little goal to shoot for. 150 minutes of moderate activity, which is a brisk walk. It's not running up Saddle Rock or, killing yourself on a spin bike, but just 150 minutes a week can lower your relative risk of dying by 50%. It's a lot. It also really helps upregulate the immune system. And this is kind of an important time during COVID. It upregulates natural killer cells, which are exactly what they sound like. They go in and they kill bad cells. COVID related, movement increases cytotoxic T cells, which are also cells that kill off bad cells, and it sends them to vulnerable parts of the body, such as the respiratory tract. So we have seen during COVID that people who are at increased risk of severe reactions are often more sedentary. And so there's a lot of benefits to movement. It really can improve blood sugar control. So when we go back to the beginning, I really think blood sugar management is important, and movement is an important piece of this. So if you were to go out and to eat a big meal, but you were to go exercise beforehand, it makes your muscles really hungry to soak up that blood sugar so that it doesn't go to your liver, increasing your risk of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. There are also great studies that show that a short walk, a 10 to 15 minute walk after eating, significantly brings down your glucose. So if you eat and your blood sugar starts to rise and you go out for a walk, it's going to, rather than just continue to steeply spike, it's going to kind of blunt, and it will help bring that down more quickly. So it really does improve blood sugar control. It reduces our risk of depression and anxiety. It makes us feel better. Sometimes if we just go for a short walk, our perspective totally changes. It helps promote better sleep. It lowers our risk of cancer. There's just a lot of benefits that we probably already know. So just some kind of ideas for increasing your movement. Get a partner. I think accountability is huge, and sharing exercise with somebody is really important. There are a lot of days, I will be honest, I would probably not exercise if I didn't have the accountability of going to meet someone. And so I arrange my life that way. I have friends that it's my social time, and it makes me get out and do it. Because if I don't meet them, I often don't do it. Make it fun. Do something that you like. If it's dancing in the kitchen for 10 minutes, turn on the music and dance. It does not matter what it is. The movement that you like is the best movement that you should do. Lay out your workout clothes at night. I know that there are quite a few people who do these rather than trying to dig them out in the morning when you really don't want to do them. Lay them out so it's the first thing that you see. Or if you want to work out when you get home from work, lay them on the bed. So when you walk in, you see them, you change your clothes. Sometimes just changing your clothes is all you need to get the motivation to move. Take the stairs. So studies have shown that if there's stairs and an elevator, 5% of people are going to take the stairs. It's free exercise. It's increasing that daily movement component and seeing those benefits, even if you're not getting the exercise component. Look for opportunities to walk. Maybe park far away at the grocery store instead of fighting for the closest parking stall. Just looking for little areas that you can move just a little bit more. Habit stack. So this is an idea by James Clear, who's an author who wrote Atomic Habits, which is a great book I'll talk about at the end. But he talks about stacking a habit that you already have with a new habit that you want to have. So he gives the example of somebody who would get up in the morning and they would make tea. So you get up, you put the hot water on, and you know that you're going to have 5 minutes for the tea to boil. So instead of scrolling on your phone for 5 minutes or checking email for 5 minutes, do some sort of exercise for 5 minutes. You know that you're going to start that kettle every single morning. You're always going to do that. So he actually would put a 5-pound weight next to his tea kettle and do exercises with that. Whatever habit that you already have, try to stack and add a new habit to that so that you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. walk around the block after dinner. And that, we kind of already talked about that. So those are some ideas for trying to increase your movement. The exercise component is important, but movement is more than just that 20, 30, 60 minutes of dedicated exercise, but it's also your daily activity. So stress. So this is admittedly one of the areas that I don't know as much about. And so hopefully the talks earlier in the series have been helpful, but I do think it's really important. And so I did want to kind of touch on it and give one little idea in terms of managing stress. So stress, what it is it's a generic system in the body to mobilize other systems in the brain and the body. So stress is our response to stressors. And our response can either be physical or psychological. And what stress does is it upregulates certain systems in our body, and downregulates other systems. And these are the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems. So we all have stress. Stress is not necessarily the enemy. How we manage stress is pretty important in terms of what it does to our bodies and to our lives. So there's acute stress, so the stress that happens suddenly, and then there's chronic stress, the stress that goes on and on and on. Acute stress doesn't necessarily have long-term side effects to our body, but we want to know how to manage it. So what happens is you get this acute stress, your sympathetic nervous system gets activated, you get this dump of cortisol and adrenaline, and then it causes you to become agitated and it makes you want to do something. And so you get an email from your boss and you get acute stress. My kids start fighting and it's acute stress. And your body reacts by this dump of cortisol and adrenaline, and the sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight system. The thing is it's really hard to control the mind with the mind. So we know when this happens, we get this mental and physical response, but how do we get ourselves out of it? And trying to control my mind with my mind is really difficult. So what we can do is we can actually activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest, with something physical. And so you're trying to control the mind with the body. And there's something called the physiologic sigh, which is something that you actually see babies and kids do. So what it is it's a deep breath in, followed by a short breath in and a long exhale. So it looks like this. And what that does is it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. And truly, when I did that, I feel a change in my body. And so you're in just doing that physical exercise, you're deregulating the sympathetic nervous system and you're upregulating the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's just a little trick to kind of keep in your back pocket. So then chronic stress is what this can lead to all the negative health outcomes. And helpful tools for this can be exercise, sleep, social connection, gratitude practice, meditation, breathing, nature, getting outside. And hopefully the talks that were earlier in this series were more helpful in this. Dealing with stress, it's really easy to say manage your stress, and knowing how to do it is really hard, but I do think that it's important. So then sleep, and again, you had a whole talk on sleep, so hopefully that too was helpful. But sleep has become really important in our current health system. So there would be people who would argue that there's one pillar to health, and it's sleep, and it's the foundation for everything else. And sleep is a big deal. And I think we're learning this more and more. We kind of had this philosophy like, oh, I'll sleep when I die, or I don't need to sleep. But I think we're learning how important it is. And there have been more and more studies that have come out that have shown that sleep duration has been strongly linked to the increased risk of all-cause mortality and cardiovascular disease. And this is something that's kind of newer, I think, or in the data. And it has notable effects on nutrition, movement, immunity, and mental health. So movement, sleep, the less you sleep, the less motivated you're going to be the next day, the less intense your ability is, the less intense your workouts are going to be, and the higher your risk of injury. And so limiting sleep the night before is going to make you less motivated to move the next day. Nutrition. So we see a big difference in blood sugar regulation following a poor night's sleep. So you might have a great night's sleep and eat the same meal, a meal, and have a limited blood sugar response, and then have a poor night's sleep, eat the exact same meal, and have a much bigger blood sugar response. And so it has been correlated with blood sugar dysregulation. It also is correlated with some hormone changes. So sleep will decrease leptin, decrease sleep or dysregulated sleep will decrease leptin. And leptin is our full hormone. It's the hormone that tells us that we're full. But it also increases, if you don't sleep, you have increased ghrelin, and ghrelin is our hunger hormone. So when you are not getting good sleep, the hormone that tells you you're full is low, and the hormone that tells you that you're hungry is high. And they have shown that people who sleep 5 to 6 hours, so the goal that they say is 7 to 9 hours, but that people who sleep 5 to 6 hours, the next day will eat an increased 200 to 300 calories because of this hormone dysregulation. So it really matters. Immunity. So there was recently a well-controlled trial that showed that people who slept 5 hours compared to people who slept 8 hours were 5 times more likely to get a cold. We also see this interestingly during daylight savings time. We have this annual time of study where we decrease people's sleep by 1 hour, and they see around that time of daylight savings, they see an increase, 24% increase in heart attacks. It matters. What we do in terms of sleep really matters. And then mental health. So there was also an interesting study where they took people and reduced their sleep by 1 hour. So it was less than 7, so around the 5 to 6 hour range. And then the next day they put them in an MRI machine. And what they saw is that the deep emotional centers of the brain were much more active. So this is the amygdala. And what the amygdala does is it helps regulate emotion. And this was up to 60% more reactive. So the less sleep you have, the more emotionally reactive and impulsive you're going to feel. And I think we probably can all see how emotions are different when we're sleep deprived. So the goal is 7 to 9 hours. Now that's 7 to 9 hours of actual sleep. That is not sleep opportunity. So sleep opportunity is the time that you give yourself to sleep. So if you were to go to bed at 10 and get up at 6, that would be 8 hours of sleep opportunity. If you track your sleep, you're not going to be sleeping that full 8 hours. So if you're shooting for 7 hours of sleep, you really need to give yourself 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep opportunity. And the thing about it is that chronically depriving yourself of sleep will lower your baseline level of health. And you begin to think that that's normal. The way that you're feeling is normal because that feels like it's your baseline because you're chronically sleep deprived. But I would challenge you, if you feel like you're not getting at least 7 hours of quality sleep, to shoot for that. And you might see that your baseline level of health elevates and you start to feel better in ways you didn't even know you were feeling poorly. So really quickly, some sleep tips. So the first one is really interesting, sunlight early in the morning. So this is, there's a professor at Stanford, Andrew Huberman. He's a professor of neuropsychology and ophthalmology. And if you're more interested, or if you're interested in this, I would encourage you to look into his stuff. But what he has shown is that sunlight directly into the eyes, so stepping outside, not through a window, car window doesn't count, without sunglasses, activates the body's circadian rhythm. And the circadian rhythm is this natural cycle that we have in our body of waking and sleeping. And what early morning sunlight does is it helps time the release of a lot of hormones throughout the day, and most important of which is the melatonin at night. So melatonin is our natural sleep hormone. And when you release that sleep hormone, the melatonin at night, is directly correlated to when your eyes first visualize sunlight. So what he encourages people to do is immediately or as soon as you can upon waking, step outside for 2 to 5 minutes without sunglasses, and getting that first morning light can significantly improve the sleep quality that you have the following night. Limit caffeine and alcohol. Caffeine late in the day, you probably know this, can definitely disrupt sleep. Alcohol really can as well. So a lot of people use this to go to sleep, but alcohol actually ends up fragmenting sleep. And it also really affects the REM cycle of your sleep, which is your deep rest sleep. So while it might put you to sleep more quickly, it really disrupts your sleep a lot. Regularity, trying to go to bed and get up about the same time is helpful, even on the weekends, close-ish. Temperature, so making sure you're sleeping in a cool room. Darkness, limiting as much light exposure as you can, and saving the bed for sleep and other activities, but not, like lots of snacking and movies and things other than sleep, trying to kind of reserve that. Because what happens is that you get in bed, and if you're watching a movie and eating a snack every night, every time you get in bed, that's what your body is going to expect, and not to go to sleep. So the last section is connection and purpose. And again, this is one area that I hope previous conversations have been helpful. But one thing that's pretty interesting is this study of these blue zones. And what blue zones are is there was a group that did some demographic work in areas of the world that have the most centurions, and those are people that are living over 100. So they looked throughout the entire world and found cities that had the most people who are over 100. These cities are in Japan. There's one in Japan, one in Italy, one in Costa Rica, one in Greece, and one in California. And they did demographic work of these people and tried to figure out what it was that they all had in common that helped them live these long, healthy lives. And lots of different components to what that included, but two of them were purpose and connection. Purpose, why do you get up in the morning? Why they had a strong sense of purpose for the reasons that they lived their life. And connection, they had really strong social circles. And I think we really saw this during COVID, that loneliness can really be correlated with negative health outcomes. And I think that we're kind of seeing the ramifications of that through COVID. And those around you really affect your health. So the people that you surround yourself with have a big impact on the decisions that you make. If health is something that's important to you, but not to your social circle, it's going to be really hard. And if you find people that want to live the way that you want to live and prioritize the same things, it's going to be more helpful. So working on surrounding yourself with a community who supports you and your health endeavors and the lifestyle that you want to live, I think is important. So there's one thing that I just like to close with is this study by Dr. Kara Fitzgerald. So this was done at the National University of Natural Medicine, and it was a study that was published recently in the journal Aging. And this was the very first peer-reviewed study, randomized controlled clinical trial that showed a significant change in the lowering of chronological age. So you have your birth age, the age that you are according to your birthday, but your body also has a chronological age, and that's kind of complicated how that's calculated. But you can be 50 years old, but chronologically you can be 55 or 45. And what she did was a study that in 8 weeks, she was able to show the lowering of chronological age by 3 years based on changes that people made in terms of their lifestyle and their diet. So that goes back to the first quote. You have the power to make your body work for you. You don't have to outsource your healthcare. So what the components of the study included was a plant-forward diet, so lots of vegetables. They did include meat and protein, and they did remove grains and dairy. So they included those dietary changes. Oh, I forgot to say, this study was done in men, ages 50 to 72. Men are often easier to study because they don't have hormones, and hormones affect a lot of outcomes. So this was done in men. So they changed made these dietary changes. They did add a greens powder, which was just a vitamin supplement powder and a probiotic. They did time restricted feeding. So they did a 12 and 12. So they ate for 12 hours and fasted for 12 hours. They added an exercise component, and exercise was 30 minutes, 5 days a week at 60 to 80% perceived exertion. It was not hours on end. It was 30 hours where you're not working 100%, but you're working about 60 to 80% exertion 5 days a week. They focused on sleep. So they tried to shoot for at least 7 hours of sleep, and they did include a meditation practice. So through these 6 main changes, diet, some supplements, time restricted feeding, exercise, sleep, and meditation, they showed a lowering of chronological age by 3 years. What you do, what you eat, how you live makes a difference in how your body functions and in your health. And it's just really important. And so I hope that this has given you some kind of ideas and easy takeaways. These are just some things that I think can be potentially helpful, just some places to maybe start. I personally love podcasts. I can multitask while I'm listening. I think 2 really great podcasts are the Andrew Huberman podcast. He's the neuroscientist out of Stanford. It is pretty science heavy, but it's pretty fascinating. And then the Doctor's Pharmacy with an F, with Dr. Mark Hyman. He's also a traditionally trained physician, but has kind of focused more on functional medicine in the majority of his career. So I think those are 2 really great resources for podcasts. 2 good books, Atomic Habits. So James Clear is the one that talked about habit stacking, how to get new habits into your life, but he also talks about how to remove habits. And he gives some great, easy, actionable ways to change your habits. If you're interested in sleep, Dr. Matthew Walker is one of the leading experts in sleep. And then apps. I mean, there are tons like that. I think has been one of the benefits of COVID is that there have been tons of apps that have come out. One that I personally like is the Peloton app. You do not have to have the expensive bike. The app itself is $13 a month. I think you can try it for 3 months for $13. And it has tons on there. It has walking, running, yoga, meditation, stretching, kickboxing, Pilates, bar. It has so much on there. So finding some sort of an easy app that you can do at home, I think is great. Some things that are a little bit more expensive, but can be helpful. So I do think a lot of times you manage what you measure. And so if you're tracking something, it helps you manage it. So smart devices, the wearables, the Fitbit. My Fitbit has a sleep tracker on it, and I can tell you when the nights that I drink 1 or 2 drinks, my sleep score is lower. And so I honestly will think about that when I'm deciding whether or not I want to have a drink, how I feel about my sleep score that night. And actually seeing the change, I think is really helpful. Apple Watch can do that. Levels is really interesting. So Levels is actually a direct-to-consumer continuous glucose monitor. This is a little bit more expensive, but pretty interesting if you're interested in following your glucose. So it's a sensor that you put on the back of your arm, and it tracks your glucose 24 hours a day. You don't have to have a prescription for it. And you just use an app on your phone to scan the sensor, and you will see your glucose throughout the entire day. And you will see what the foods that you're eating are doing to your glucose, or what stress is doing, or sleep. And so that's pretty interesting. Oura Ring is a sleep tracker ring that you can use. Also a little bit more expensive, but it really can be helpful in tracking your sleep. And then the alcohol experiment's another kind of interesting thing. This is actually a free program that you commit to not drinking alcohol for 30 days. So if you're going to be doing like dry January or dry July or sober October, or any sort of period of time where you're going to try to limit the amount or remove the alcohol that you're drinking, this is a free experiment where you can join. You join a group of other people who are doing the same 30 days. So you have a community there. But they also send out a video, like a short 10 to 15 minute video on all sorts of topics on alcohol. And I think it's really interesting. And if you're going to be doing that anyway, that sober 30 days, to kind of get a little bit of perspective and insight into that is interesting. And it's free. And I'm always a proponent of anything that's free and helpful. So that is my talk. I was really big and broad. I hope that there was just one thing that maybe you could take away from tonight. And what I don't want you to do is to feel overwhelmed, like you have to go overhaul your whole life. That's just too much, and that doesn't work, and it's not sustainable. So I would encourage you to pick one thing just do one thing and try to get good at that. Maybe it's removing sugar from your condiments, or maybe it's, doing a 10-minute walk after dinner, or just picking something, getting good at it, and then moving on to the next thing. This is a journey. It's a really long journey. I take steps forward, and then I take a couple back, and then I regroup and take a few steps forward again. And one of my favorite people said, life is just continually regrouping, and not getting down on yourself or hard on yourself if you fail at times. You can pick back up and move on, and it's a long process. And so giving yourself that grace and that time, but really thinking about the energy that you're putting towards your health, I think is important. So hopefully some of that was helpful.
Well, thank you so much, Katie. That was fantastic. I learned so much. I appreciate the, start with one thing, because it just was so dense with so many great tips, but I really loved how each section you had really tangible tips associated with them. And I just want to remind people, we are recording this tonight, and we'll be putting it up at a later time on our YouTube, so you can come back and revisit all these topics. And I really loved how you just framed the whole conversation with finding your why. I think that's really important, to look at that why, and the daily choices just helps us meet those goals easier. And I see a question in the chat. We've got a few minutes, so if anyone else has any other questions, please put that in the chat or in the Q&A. Yeah, there was just so many wonderful takeaways. I love that you connected the movement with the social. I thought that was a really good tip, and kind of like a mindset change. That was so interesting about getting the morning light right away. What was the name of the person?
So it's Andrew Huberman. It's that first podcast. Yeah, he's the Stanford professor, and he has a podcast specifically on that. And it's it's a no cost thing that you can do, and it's something that I never would have thought about. I mean, about the darkness and the temperature, but I had no idea. And he goes into all the pathophysiology behind why that's important. But that was really helpful, and it's a good little reminder. And like this morning, I was reading a book, and I'm like, oh, I should sit outside for 5 minutes and read my book, and I did, and I was doing that anyway. And so it's like, well, maybe if I do this now, it'll help me sleep tonight. And I don't know, but it's pretty interesting. So Andrew Huberman.
Okay, thank you. I'll look that up. And I just wanted to say, I love that you were plugging books. We're the library. We've got books. So I did put in the chat. The first one is The Why We Sleep, and then the second link is for The Atomic Habits. So we have these books accessible if people are really curious and want to get on them. But we do have questions. So Carla had asked, is the levels the same as DEX for diabetics?
Yeah, so Levels uses, yes, it's the same. DEX is a different brand. Levels sends you, the Libre, the Freestyle Libre. So if you are diabetic and you can probably get a continuous glucose monitor prescribed to you. But the people who are not diabetic, but who are interested in managing their blood sugar without a diabetes diagnosis, this is a direct to consumer product.
Okay, that's a helpful.
It's how to get a continuous glucose monitor without a diabetes diagnosis. But if you have diabetes, I'm sure you ask your physician. My guess is you could get one covered by your insurance company.
Oh, great. Even better.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully, their goal, the Levels goal is to drive down this cost, and to show the benefits of preventing diabetes rather than just treating it. So it would be much cheaper to prevent it. So.
Yes, definitely. And then Karen had a question. How about vitamins? She takes vitamin D, fish oil, and multiples. Are these important or not?
Yeah, no, I think those can be really helpful. So I think the supplement world is massive. And so I do think that there's a small handful of things that most people are deficient in. Vitamin D is there's almost nobody that isn't deficient in vitamin D. So I think that is wonderful. A good multivitamin, particularly that's high in B vitamins, I think can be really helpful. The fish oil is perfect. So it's really hard to get enough omega-3 through a diet. And so I am a big believer in that. The other one to kind of add and to think about would be magnesium. And so actually a large majority of the population is also deficient in magnesium. It's really not uncommon. So adding magnesium can be helpful, and different forms of magnesium can benefit other areas. So like if you tend towards constipation, magnesium citrate can be really helpful. There's also magnesium threonate and magnesium biglycinate, and those can be sleep promoting. And so taking those at nighttime, I just recently tried switching to magnesium threonate and going to see how it works. But I think adding a magnesium supplement can help for lots of different reasons, and then finding the right formulary that is helpful for maybe some of your other side effects. So those would be the main ones that I would say: a good multivitamin, vitamin D, magnesium, and an omega-3.
Great. That seems manageable. And that's interesting. No, I'm like, to me, magnesium's magnesium, but you could be even more specific. So
yeah, magnesium glycinate is also another one that's more easily available to the body. So those would be the ones that I would recommend.
Oh, okay. One more question. How about melatonin?
So I will be honest with you, I am not a expert in melatonin. I think that people are a little bit divided here, because melatonin is something that's naturally produced in our body. And when we supplement with that, I think that can affect the natural hormone production that we have. I would have to defer to other experts in that. I have heard both. I have heard people are supportive of that, and then I have heard people who would encourage you to try to find other ways to promote healthy sleep other than melatonin.
And you gave some great sleeping tips. So
yeah. So, but I mean, I would look into, if you're curious on that, I think Andrew Huberman, Mark Hyman, and Dr. Walker would be really great resources. More information on that.
Yeah, so thank you all. Thank you, everyone. I know we've had a lot of you hang on through all this series, so we really appreciate your support and curiosity to improve your health. And if you want to stay up to date with our upcoming events, you can always check out ncwlibraries.org or follow us on Facebook.
Thank you.
Bye.